point. Forgive my technophobia, but can everybody hear me? No? Okay. Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you, Dennis. Professor Sullivan. Let me concentrate on Israel. Let me penetrate into some very difficult issues, very complicated, incredibly controversial. What we're talking about when we talk about Israel is conceivably the most intractable conflict currently in the world. I'm not here to offer any kind of clear resolution. I'm simply here to explore the fundamental dilemmas and challenges. The statistics that I have are from the Central Bureau of Statistics provided by the Israeli government. And I just want you to understand that even within Israel, the right wing considers the Central Bureau of Statistics to be left-wing propaganda. So that is how difficult it is, even within Israel, to get a handle even on a mutually acceptable set of statistics. Another point I want to make right from the outset. I am not a statistician. I am not a demographer. I do feel that the issue of demography is the most compelling issue in Israel. I think it is a red herring. I mean, maybe I'm going way over the line here. I think it's a red herring to see the existential threats to the state of Israel coming from the outside. I think the existential threats to the future identity of the state of Israel is coming from within. And I would like to explore that in the next not being a statistician, but being a fairly reasonable, objective observer of reality, I'm beginning to understand that there's a great disparity between statistics and facts. I have come across so many conflicting statistics about demographics that I'm not sure what to believe, and I'm going to explore as best I can the central argument in Israel over the current population figures in the West Bank, because an understanding or an acceptance of one person's demographic reality of Palestinians living in the West Bank and another's may determine the future political resolution or lack of such of this conflict. It's all a question of demographics. The total population of the state of Israel I have come across is about 7.8 million, growing fairly rapidly, about 2%. Try to imagine the state of Massachusetts with another 1.2 million people. Massachusetts has about 6.6 million. But the state of Israel is the size of New Jersey, not Massachusetts. So you have, if I'm not mistaken, the second most densely populated industrialized country in the world. First, I think, is the Netherlands. Correct me if I'm wrong. 75% of the population is currently Jewish. About 20.4% is Arab. We're talking about 5.7 million Jews, about 1.5 million Arabs. We're having demographic discussions and debates even here in the American Jewish community. Are the most Jews now living in Israel, or are they still living in the United States? It all depends what demographer you're paying attention to. Len Sachs of Brandeis University insists that the American Jewish population is now 6.5 million. Steve Cohen, professor at Hebrew Union College in New York and NYU, insists that we're only 5.4. There's a disparity, about 1 million Jews, more or less. And these guys have been arguing feverishly and vehemently since 2003, actually even before, with the very controversial 1990 Jewish population study. So the demographic arguments are going on here. The demographic arguments are going on certainly in the state of Israel. 4.3%, as I understand it, Dennis, about 318,000 people in Israel are non-Arab Christians or non-Arab Muslims or no religion at all, Armenians, Circassians, Samaritans. In 1948, there were approximately 150 to 160,000 Palestinian Arabs who, for whatever reason, did not flee the country. They stayed within the borders of what became Israel. That 150 to 160,000 Palestinian Arabs in 1948 now number 1.57 million. That is one of the most explosive population growths imaginable. Now, this population, let's remember, includes about 250,000 Arabs in Jerusalem. By the way, 82.6% are Sunni, about 9% are Christian, about 9% are Druze, and the most explosive birth rate in the entire world is the Bedouin population, which now numbers close to 250,000 people and expanding at a rate of about 4.8%, one of the highest birth fertility rates in the world. Let me offer a breakdown of the Jewish community in Israel because I think this has bearing on the future political resolution of the conflict. There are now about 10% of the Israeli Jewish population that are ultra-Orthodox, or in Hebrew, the Haredim, meaning those who tremble before God, Haredim. They number, and I've read varying statistics, they could be as many as 550 to as many as 800,000 people. And their birth rate is just below that of the Bedouins. So the ultra-religious population growth in Israel is explosive. You can see this if you're ultra-Orthodox as a good blessing. You could see this if you're not ultra-Orthodox as an existential threat to the future identity of the State of Israel. But let's go further into this. Most people have this absurd notion that Israel is a country of purely secular Jews with only a handful of Orthodox people who go to shul or synagogue almost on a daily basis, and the whole rest of Israel is one big, huge kibbutz with everybody dressed in shorts and sandals and never wearing a necktie. But the fact is, for the most part, and I'll offer some of my own conclusions here, the Israelis are pretty religious. And this sense of religiosity, this sense of religiousness, I think is going to have political affect. The second largest component of the Jewish population of Israel is what are called Zionist religious people, or national religious people, or people who wear kippot srugot, the knitted skull cap, the knitted kippah. These are Orthodox Jews. You can call them modern Orthodox, but they're Orthodox Jews who serve in the army, who are in the settlements, who now, and here's a statistic you better keep in mind, who now constitute between 30 to 40% of all combat officers in the IDF. And if you don't think that's an important fact, you better think twice. We can get into this later if you want. A third group is religious traditionalists. These are people who follow halakha, or Jewish law, pretty faithfully, but they're not perceived as Orthodox. That's 12%. And then you have 27% of the Jewish population that is called non-religious traditionalists. These are people who follow halakha to a certain extent, but they're pretty serious Jews. My sense is that in the United States of America, in our American Jewish community, we would call these people very religious. You add all this together, and you come up with 56% of the Jewish population of Israel that by our standards certainly would be considered religious. And only 43% of the Jewish population of Israel can be considered secular, but when you start breaking down the secular Israeli Jewish population, you find out that 53% believe in God, and 53% will light candles on Friday night, and they'll go to a Passover Seder, and they'll get their kids bar mitzvahed or bat mitzvahed. They follow the burial rituals of... I think this is important. So, the total Israeli population, including 200,000 Jews living in East Jerusalem, a 250,000 Arabs living in Jerusalem, 300,000 settlers, as Professor Sullivan pointed out, about 27,000 people in the Golan. And what is never included in population statistics in the state of Israel are about 270,000 foreigners. Foreigners. People who have, in effect, replaced the Palestinians after the intifadas and after all the turmoil. These are Filipinos, and these are Thais, and these are people from Eastern Europe, and they're doing a lot of the gut work, and the Filipinos are now the nannies, and they're now the housekeepers, and they are people taking care of aged and elderly people. They're not included in the statistics. And what's happening now in Israel is a huge problem what to do with these people when their visas run out. They want to stay, they feel comfortable in Israel. The Israeli government feels they cannot absorb them, and many of them are being deported. 69% of the Israelis are Sabras born in Israel. About 21% come from Europe and the United States, and about 9.6% are Asian and African. The growth rates, in the 1990s, it was very high. It was like 3% because 1.2 million people flowed into the state of Israel from the former Soviet Union. And it was that inflow, the massive inflow of Soviet Jews, that propelled the extraordinary economic thrust forward, which we now call the high-tech generation, the explosion of entrepreneurial talent in Israel, the fact that Israel, despite this world recession, has an economic growth rate of about 5.2%. The Haredim, as I mentioned before, is about 4.4. The Arab rate, I've read all kinds of statistics, but I think it's about 2.6. The Muslims, 2.8. The Bedouin is very high, about 4.6. The ethnic mix, this is not an issue that it was when I first came to Israel in 1970. For the first time, the Mizrahi or the Oriental or the Sephardic Jews now constitute the majority. People from Morocco, 800,000 Jews in Israel are from Morocco. Second highest is from Iraq, about 404,000 people. Yemen, almost 300,000 Israelis come originally from Yemen. Iran, 263,000. Algeria and Tunisia, about 224,000, and about 130,000 are from Ethiopia. The Ashkenazim, like myself, I'm from German, Polish, Eastern European, Jewish background, now constitutes only 47.6% of the Jewish population, the majority from Poland, Romania,